All right, we have begun. This is the Hypnotorious Podcast. I am David Barron, and we have also with us John Wylie. We're both hypnotists.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, John. We're both hypnotists. I'm in Oregon. John is in Idaho. We have been very fortunate, and I have sort of plugged this in a couple of the podcasts, that we have the author of the Ellipsis Manual on hand here. This is Chase Hughes. Chase, how you doing?
Hello, all.
Excellent. If you are not familiar with the Ellipsis Manual, I highly recommend that you get it. It is, well, what's interesting is as I was reading it, now I've read, you sort of gave me a review copy before it was published, so I've read that. But I now have the book in my hand, and I sort of vowed to wade through it as quickly as I could. What I noticed about it, Chase, is it seemed to be in the type of order that you learned your skills. And
yes, it was. It's the same. It was written in the order I teach and the order that not necessarily how I learned, but how I wish I'd learned.
Ah, okay. So just so everyone knows, it starts off with observing people and their micro behaviors, their small expressions, and simply observing it without any sort of judgment, and then beginning to sort of measure that in bundles of behaviors to determine things like anxiety and deception and fear. And that's relatively accurate, would you not say?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay. Just so you know, everyone listening here, so some of you know me as Dantalian Jones. I wrote all these books that have mind control in the title. My first introduction to Chase was an email, and he said, "Hi, I'm Chase Hughes. I've taught military interrogation classes. I'd love to talk with you." I've never gotten an email like that before. So I immediately wanted to talk to this guy. And from that, I mean, your particular interest in it was some things I'd written about, how we sort of picked each other's minds, but you wanted to talk to me because of some things I had written. Is that right, Chase?
Absolutely. I had a person in a class one time I was in Arizona gave me a copy of your book, and it was like a hardback copy or a paperback copy of your book, and I immediately, it sounded so interesting. I went straight to Amazon, and I think I ordered 2 or 3 books that night of yours.
And was that the Perfected Mind Control?
It was Perfected Mind Control, okay. And Mind Control Language Patterns.
All right. And so those of you who don't know, Perfected Mind Control, I wrote up as sort of a series of hypnosis scripts that are designed to create, for lack of a better term, an alternate personality that someone could have and enjoy. And Chase has definitely taken and run with that farther than I ever have. So from the progression that you've started with, with studying human behavior, you've developed it into something that's called behavioral engineering. How is that different from what we know of as NLP or other sorts of change work?
It's a fantastic question. I think behavior engineering encompasses the whole of every skill, every piece of research, and everything that seems like it's not related to psychology, kind of smashed in together there. And I wanted a program basically to be able to change someone's behavior the fastest and most effective way possible, obviously with my job. And we wanted a program that didn't just have a few regular hypnosis techniques. We wanted something that was founded in every area, every corner of our science that we all practice.
It's one of the more in-depth things I've seen. I mean, when I started, I was learning language patterns to pick up women. and there's some of that in there, language patterns, which is really good. But you actually go so much deeper into measuring people's values and needs and the things that really motivate them. Let's talk about that. That's what makes it so interesting.
Sure. We wanted to figure out what motivated people because when I was growing up, I got started pretty much the same way. I was just a kind of a douchebag kid, who thought he had the world figured out, and I wanted to go learn some tricks to go pick up girls, basically. I wanted choice. Instead of being the chosen, I wanted to be the chooser. Mm-hmm. And I found out using these methods like Robert Cialdini or Dale Carnegie or all these books on influence, I would use them, and they would only work sometimes. And I started discovering that they only worked on a certain type of person, or that they only worked when I felt a certain way or when everything was aligned. And none of the techniques, literally none of them, were designed for specific people, or nor did they teach you how to kind of tailor them to suit the needs of different people, so they're more effective.
And okay, if you were to, I mean, we don't have a whole class time to do it, but if you were to talk to someone and sort of describe what is the difference, give some people an idea about that.
The difference between what exactly?
Well, but difference between like using a language pattern to get someone interested and aroused, as opposed to using behavioral engineering, or in this case, the ellipsis process.
Sure. So first off, let's give a scenario here so people can kind of imagine this better. We're trying to influence a person at Starbucks to get free coffee. First, you might read something online. This is how you influence people. This is how you're nice to people. This is how to build rapport. So you do all of these things, and they might work 20 to 30% of the time. And a difference between that and behavior engineering would be that before you had your turn at Starbucks, you profiled the way their hair looks, how much eye contact they made with the customer before you, whether or not they break eye contact as they say thank you. So you start to see these social weaknesses and how they respond to the customer in front of you, whether or not they're timid or authoritative, and exactly how you need to react and become to get the best influence, best behavioral outcome from the person you're speaking to. So that would be the biggest difference. So on one hand, an influence expert could get pretty good results most of the time, and a behavior engineering expert could get probably double or triple, I would say.
Yeah. And you're in an environment, I mean, part of your job is about influencing people, and on top of that, you also create all these opportunities to do it, which is what we should all be doing. John, I want you to, you've read the Ellipsis Manual. I want you to jump in here at any time. So what kind of questions can we sort of keep throwing here at Chase?
Well, I've read the book from cover to cover, and then I've gone back and read several of the sections, especially the earlier sections, several more times. And I have a background in NLP and in hypnosis, so a lot of these things were already really interesting to me. But the Ellipsis Manual takes it so much further.
Wow, thanks, John.
Well, thank you, Chase, for making this great information publicly available. So one question that I have is, in the process that a person has in learning these skills, I know this Ellipsis Manual, is it not intended to be like a manual on how to learn this stuff?
Yeah, we intended it to be a reference book and a textbook, like a training manual, both of those.
Okay.
And since a couple hundred have emailed me and said, hey, how am I supposed to absorb all of this information? It's like handing me a college textbook without a syllabus.
Yeah, exactly.
So we just started developing an Ellipsis training planner that goes through a 52-week or a 1-year program that kind of walks people through step by step.
Awesome. That is
Yeah,
fantastic.
that's going to be great.
Yeah, that's really good.
I think one of the things I've heard you describe it, why did you call it the ellipsis behavior, your company and your manual? That's a good question. I've heard the answer to it, but tell us why ellipsis.
I just wanted to have a cool name to begin with. I wanted it to just sound like a badass company, but I was looking around and I was just randomly looking at something online, doing some research for an English paper. And the definition of the word ellipsis, or the three dots that we put in language, means omitted, or language that was left out or omitted. And that invisible language that's unseen is, I thought, was a cool name for the company because it represents the definition of what an ellipsis is.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. One of the things that I've taken from our conversation together at the Ellipsis Manual is something, intuitively, I've been doing hypnosis for like 20 years, but you brought it right to the surface, the whole value of dissociation and what you can do with that. Now, we've had podcasts that discuss dissociation, how you're supposed to separate someone, at the very least, from their problem so they can look at it objectively. But you've sort of made experiments to see how far you can dissociate somebody. And is there any part of that you want to discuss here?
Sure, I'm comfortable talking about it. We wanted dissociation, not necessarily from problems. I know you approach all of these things from a much different angle than me. And that's why I wanted to write the manual that was kind of a universally applicable tool. But the way that somebody like me or someone working in a field similar to mine would use dissociation is to maximize someone's disconnection from consequences. So the more dissociated a person is, the more concerned they are with the consequences of their actions. And that means I'm an intelligence asset in a foreign country. I can talk another person into committing treason and spying for the United States, or talking to somebody in an interrogation room. Using dissociation, you're more likely to get the truth than you are with hypnosis. And a lot of different outcomes. So if you're in a therapeutic context, the dissociation might be from just completely breaking down and letting everything go and talking to your therapist.
Right.
And I think the levels of that, you asked about the levels.
Mm-hmm.
There's a conversational level where we are still paying attention to the conversation, but we're kind of outside of our body. We're what I call in front of our eyes the whole time. So if you're really paying attention to a conversation, you're dissociated a little bit because you're not aware of your body, your posture, and all that stuff. The person talking to you has made you comfortable enough to come out in front of your eyes. So that would be like the first stage. And there's multiple stages of dissociation, all the way to where we obviously create a Manchurian candidate or an alter personality. But in between that, there's varying degrees. And most of it, I'd say if there's 10 levels, level 1 through 7 could probably be done in a social setting or a bar or a restaurant.
Mm-hmm. Anything else requires more extensive training?
More extensive training and the investment of some time.
Right.
There's some things we do, like the entrainment phase, that you need a tremendous amount of authority to be able to kind of bring out this dissociation in another person.
Yeah, good. You had also mentioned in the book, and you just said the word authority. In the book, there's a small chapter that is one of the best chapters in there that is totally on authority. And I've told people that reading that chapter is worth the price of the book alone.
Oh, thank you.
Great chapter.
Yeah, give us a synopsis of authority. And I think one of the things that you'd mentioned earlier, I want to say it before you, is that many of us started trying to become the ideal romantic partner and attract women. And you make it really clear that if you have authority, you're attractive to everybody.
Yes, that attraction is just a byproduct.
Exactly. So give everyone a little brief on authority as you described it in the book. I think it's going to be a gem.
I don't. I'd love to say I remember how I described it, but I'll give you the candid, no BS version right here. I read about the Milgram experiment, which is a study on obedience. It was done by Dr. Stanley Milgram at I think it was Yale University. But they, for anybody who's not familiar with it, it's basically you volunteer for this experiment. You walk in there, and they tell you to shock this guy, who's another volunteer, when he doesn't learn these words properly. So the guy keeps messing up these words, and they keep shocking him and shocking him. And this shock machine has a continuum from like 1 to 100, and all the way at the end, there's like XXX. It's got skull and bones on it. And these people who are volunteering for the experiment, with this man in the other room screaming, begging to be let out, around 80% of them shocked the other person to the point of death. Little did they know the person in the other room was a conspirator or part of the experiment. And no one was forced to stay in the room. They could get up and leave whenever they wanted. Not one person in the 10 years, and I think 91 times the experiment's been replicated since it's originally done in the 60s. No person has ever gone into the other room to check on the person they hurt. And the results stay the same, that about 80% of us, 80% will commit murder because a man with a clipboard and a lab coat told us just to keep going with the experiment. There was no force, there was no coercion, there was no influence, there was no hypnosis methods. It was a man with no name tag on, with a fresh haircut, a good-looking guy, just standing there saying words like, the experiment must continue. It's important that you keep going. At no time were they forced, even verbally, to continue with the experiment. So I think authority beats skill every time. And if you have that type of authority, if you naturally exude the lab coat type of authority, you can get whatever you want without having to study the skills. But if you have that authority and you know the skills, you can do whatever you'd like to anyone you'd like. And you can help anyone you'd like.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, you have some pointers for people who want to demonstrate that authority.
Sure. I could give you some examples here.
Great.
One of them has to do, I'll reference one other study here. I know you guys I don't want to fatigue you guys with a bunch of experiments.
That's fine. Carry on.
They called this the crosswalk study. This was done in Texas. And they had a man in downtown Austin, Texas, I think it was, break the crosswalk signal. So he crossed the street when he's not supposed to go. And he was wearing blue jeans and a T-shirt. And about 6% of the people standing at the crosswalk would go with him and just continue across. But the exact same guy, once he put on a suit and tie, got 80% of people to cross with him, just because he changed clothes. Same haircut, same dude, same time of day. So they made sure to keep the variables to a minimum here, to where they could kind of pinpoint this down to the suit and tie. So just your level of personal appearance and grooming and hygiene plays that much of a role that you can get 60% more strangers to blindly follow you and break the law just from wearing a suit.
Right.
And it's impressive to me. It's just strange for me that a lot of this stuff doesn't get covered in a lot of influence texts. And I've kind of boiled down, and again, these are my opinions based on research and experience, 5 traits that I use to define authority. So if whoever's listened to the podcast here, if you hold your hand out, there's 5 traits here. So you consider yourself on a 1 through 3. So these are the 3 bones in each finger. You can rate yourself on each one of these and kind of figure out where you are on each one. And those are dominance, discipline, leadership, gratitude, and fun, or just having a sense of adventure. And dominance, I don't mean being domineering. You can be dominant and still lift up everyone around you. And the leadership is crucial, having that natural ability to lead people. And self-discipline is incredible. Self-discipline plays a huge role in your ability to exert that authority over the people around you, the people you come into contact with. It's amazing, a lot of the guys that send me emails that say, oh, I want to learn how to do this extremely difficult hypnotic thing, or I want to pay with like blank money or do whatever. They just want to do outlandish, crazy stuff. And I say it starts with whether or not you can make your bed in the morning. And to me, like you just FaceTimed me a few minutes ago, and you've got a giant pile of dishes, and I can tell you're the kind of guy that doesn't even make his bed, and you want to take control of another human being. Think about the difference between those two desires there. Yes. So a lot of that starts with that self-discipline and that being dominant without being domineering. So try to be dominant and feel gratitude at the same time, and that is a strange feeling, and it's a good feeling, but it's unnatural for most of us. It was unnatural for me at the beginning. I don't think I was born with any leadership skill.
Yeah, you had mentioned a couple times you've been mentored enough, and someone shook your chain in the right way, so that you started to become aware of these sorts of things.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
And
John,
I would say for one thing here, on those 5 qualities, one of those can be substituted with another, and that is dominance. A person without dominance can also have a tremendous amount of ambition without dominance and still cause authority behavior and still do pickup or whatever you want to call it. So just think about like the really disciplined starving artist.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that kind of personality. So that dominance can be replaced with ambition.
Right. All right. John?
Yeah, this is good stuff.
I wanted to there's a part in, did you include the creating of we'll call it a helper? I haven't gotten to the very end of the Ellipsis Manual, but you've covered that in the Ellipsis Manual, have you not?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, the helper is in there.
Okay, great. For those people who don't know it, and again, Chase is the one who has sort of inspired me, the helper is essentially an alternate personality. It's a personality that has qualities that the person admires, wants. And what I've done is I've taken that in my practice. I will always ask people, who are some people you admire? What are the things you admire about them? So that, and typically these are qualities that we want in ourselves. So Chase has gone a little further in the direction of actually finding at least a way in most cases to create this alter, this helper personality that's going to help the person without even them knowing it's there. That's an accurate description, Chase?
Yes, they can or cannot. It's either way. Amnesia can be given.
Okay. And essentially what I've done is I've taken that, there's no amnesia, but I introduce them to this helper with all of these qualities. And I have this process at the end when they've integrated this, that they think of how they used to be, and they say very confidently, I am not that person anymore. And I have them repeat that and repeat it and repeat it. And what I found that does is, by repeating that out loud, by thinking of how they used to be and saying I'm not that person anymore, it's an entirely different personality that's speaking. So people say you can't change personalities, and I'm saying it's sort of fun when you're doing it right anyway.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So and what I would encourage is, and you should try this in some of your experiments, tell them, having them look at their past as not being the same person. It's really easy to do in general, but when they're feeling heavy guilt and weighed down by a habit, it's a little more difficult. And I know in hypnosis, it's going to be a lot more easier to dissociate them from that person they used to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
I'd love to hear your experiment with it. So let me know. Let's see. Anything else, John? We've got the master here. He's inspired me to do so much.
Yeah.
What would you ask?
Well, I would ask him. So let's talk about something that is sometimes pretty challenging for a hypnotherapist. Say you have a client that has a pretty challenging problem, like a cocaine addiction. What kinds of principles in the Ellipsis Manual could be used to help that person leave that habit behind? What advice would you give a hypnotherapist in a situation like that, Chase?
Great question. I'm not a therapeutic practitioner right now, nor am I an authority on it. But I would say that we'll start at the beginning here. Just when you first meet that client, knowing body language doesn't just mean you know like whether or not they're comfortable or they're excited or they're happy. That means when they say the word cocaine, you can see the micro expression of either disgust or happiness or contempt on their face. And when they start talking about the experience, you can watch those micro expressions and watch how their body reacts. So you start from the first 5 minutes of the interaction, you start profiling this person to start identifying fears, weaknesses, and insecurities. And for me, those are the three biggest pivot points, because you're not going to work on happiness all the time.
Right.
If happiness,
you can leverage those things.
Right. So if happiness was really effective, people would stop smoking when the doctor says, hey, you need to stop smoking or you're going to die of lung cancer. And only like 20% of people actually do.
Right.
So the person's actual fears, dying of lung cancer is probably not one of their largest fears, even though it's ridiculous that it's not. It's because of the doctor didn't go through any kind of discovery process of what leverage points there are. So once you identify their fears, then you go into the needs and you start seeing what their needs are, and you can use those as strong, almost nauseating leverage points throughout the therapy.
I see.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And John, you were talking that you were going to be dealing with somebody who has drug issues as well. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. I'm actually going to be working with a client that has that very problem. And so I just wanted to, I understand Chase isn't a therapist, but based on his research and his extensive experience, I kind of wanted to get an idea of what his take would be on how he might approach that.
And my experience is that most of the good stuff for changing someone in that position happens long before the hypnosis. You're really sort of, I call it doing archaeology. You're uncovering their needs, their values, their strongest motivations, their fears and aversions through all of that and using it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What's in store for readers of the Ellipsis Manual? You said there's going to be a training guide along with that. What else are you envisioning?
We have, I'm probably going to release another book here probably in the next year called Authority Mastery. That chapter seemed to hit home with a lot of people, and I didn't think it would. And so everybody wants me to expound on that, so I'm in the process of doing that and building the training planner now at the same time.
How about and you have your obligations? You have a career right now you'll be retiring in about 18 months or so. What's your plans beyond that?
I think I'm just going to retire. I'm retiring from the military, so they take care of you after you leave pretty well. And I'll probably just hang out for a little while and keep writing books. I may just start a really small town hypnotherapy practice somewhere. That's my ultimate goal.
No cult building or anything like that. You could be really good at this.
My wife continues to accuse me of wanting to start a cult.
And I have tried to convince my wife that our household would be so much better if we had a slave, but she just is not open to the idea. I mean, I've tried.
You got to remind her while she's doing laundry like 10 at night.
Exactly, and I try. I say it would be so much easier, but it doesn't. She just doesn't feel comfortable with that. So, yeah. Okay. Hey, Chase, this has been great. John, any last thoughts? Anything? Yeah, great.
I have a question. So, Chase,
Yes, sir.
any plans on offering any kinds of trainings on the material for those that want face-to-face training for those that are skilled in these?
Oh, you got to do that, Chase.
That would be fantastic.
You mean like a seminar?
Yeah, some kind of a training where people can go and get hands-on practice. You know, it's one thing to read a book and to practice the exercises and things like that, and it's another thing to be able to go and interact with skilled operators who are already doing this, and to kind of soak those things up and in a controlled environment with immediate feedback. That would be fantastic. Any thoughts or any plans on doing anything like that in the future?
Every once in a while, I think about doing it, and I tell you what, I've never done a full-scale seminar before. I've done private teaching events and stuff like that for companies. But the thing that gets me, I'm always afraid that I'm going to book some huge seminar room for like 10 grand, and nobody's going to show up, or I'm going to screw up the marketing somehow, and nobody's going to come. But I probably will. I'd like to do that probably before the end of the year, if that's possible.
I'm familiar with the feeling. I've done it. But it's really not that big of a worry. I mean, you won't lose 10 grand, that's for sure. But you've got a bunch of people out there who, we're sort of in a little closed group of people who communicate, who really want to be involved in this and participate in something like a training. So I don't think you're going to have a lot of trouble. I really don't.
Sign me up.
Yes.
Great. All right, we'll get one started. It's a great idea, John, and you've inspired me to get it done.
Oh, excellent! Yeah, put it.
Good.
Set a date. Put it on ellipsisbehavior.com. That's correct? Correct.
It is. Yes.
And you'll probably get a sign up. In fact, I'll pretty much guarantee you'll get a bunch of signups.
Yeah, and be sure to let us know as soon as that training calendar comes out, because I'm a self-starter and I'll jump all over that too. You know, reading the book and practicing a lot of these skills, just for quick example, some of the videos, I know you mentioned in there that a good way to start picking up on some of these gestures that people exhibit is just to watch like police interrogations and stuff. In my experience and the ones that I've tried, a lot of times I don't get a lot out of it. I don't know if I'm I'm looking at the right kinds of videos. If you could maybe give us some ideas of some good ones to watch, things like that in the meantime.
If anybody is trying to watch behavior and see that type of behavior, believe it or not, there may be better ones out there, but the best I've ever found is watching Conan O'Brien interview guests on his show. Yes.
Okay.
Conan has that extremely direct approach to everything, a really dry sense of humor that causes kind of enjoyment, but it causes physical discomfort in a lot of people. And that will show you a lot of those micro gestures, those micro discomfort gestures that are on the behavioral table of elements.
Awesome.
Right.
Great suggestion. I appreciate that.
That's a good one. And I just love going to a coffee shop and putting on my sunglasses and watching people from a corner. That works well. A little
hey, I got
creepy.
a question for you guys.
Yeah.
If we still have time.
Yeah.
So if you guys are trying to talk to someone to come to your therapeutic practice, and you're in a Starbucks or somewhere like that, what's your one-line opening to start doing hypnotherapy on a stranger or to ask them about it?
Well,
go ahead, David.
Okay, yeah, give it some thought, John. I'll tell you what's right off my head. First thing I will always do is I will ask them what they do for a living and make them the most important person. And then I'll just say, oh, I'm a hypnotist. Almost consistently, that begins a conversation about my job. And as far as bringing them in, what I would normally do is, I talk about what I do, the changes I make, and that usually begins either they need someone who needs this service, or they can think of how they can apply it to themselves. And I do two things. I tell them incredibly how wonderful it feels that you sort of open your eyes at the end and you go, what the heck was that? And then secondly, it's incredibly easy because all you have to do is follow instructions. So I have this massive carrot in front of them and a very small stick that's just follow my instructions. And then I leave it entirely in their hands. I just say, hey, give me a call. I would love to answer more questions for you. That's typically how I do it.
Fantastic.
John, how about you?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I generally, and I don't talk about my work as a general rule when I'm out like grocery shopping or things like that. Typically, people will call me off of my website or off of some other marketing avenue, and then largely following the approach that you utilize. I just listen to them. I listen to them. A lot of times they don't know what kinds of questions to ask, so I go ahead and answer them for them, because people tend to always ask the same questions every time. So I have a pretty good idea of how that goes out, and then typically they'll book sessions and come in to see me.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to add something to that. If I remember to do it, I learned this from reading how Scientology works. Once they describe a problem, I will ask, and what effect has this had on you? So I really sort of get up the discomfort and the pain, and I will continue to ask, and have you found that you just can't control it? What effect has that had on you? So I'll sort of try and tweak the discomfort level enough so that at some point I'll just sort of throw in, well, that's what I work with in hypnosis.
Oh, yeah, brilliant. You know who actually invented that technique before Scientology started using it was Xerox.
Oh, yes.
Xerox had a sales system called SPIN, S-P-I-N. It's an acronym that I can't remember what it means, but it all had to do with I know the P in SPIN was pain.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But that's a fantastic way to do it.
Another thing I learned from some of the documents that has spilled out from Scientology is they have a culture within Scientology that basically knows that people who are not in Scientology, they have a very low desire and a very weak will. So you never ask them questions, you only give them directions. So you don't say, would you like to sit down? You say, sit here. And then you do this entrainment process enough that, by the second or third time they show up, they say, here, you say, here, sign this non-disclosure agreement. They don't even read it. And so that's one of the other things, is just constantly giving very simple directions. Follow me, sit down here, move closer, things like that.
Yeah. And it's the same way with our cell phones. I just switched from iPhone to Samsung Android, and I downloaded this thing called the Google Keyboard. And I'm going through all these permissions, and it says Google Keyboard also needs to record everything you ever type, just so we can learn how you type and the common words that you use. And I want to use the keyboard, so I'm like, all right, fine. So Just agree to all this stuff so we can have a minor convenience.
And then eventually it'll say, and we want to record your dreams as you sleep soon. Oh, sure, whatever.
Yeah. As long as it helps me somehow.
Yeah. Chase, thank you so much. This has been great. I only want the most success for you because I know you can do some awesome stuff with behavioral engineering. I'm certainly going to do everything I can to help.
And same to you. I'm looking forward to your reading your new book.
Oh, great. Thank you much. John?
Yeah, it was great to meet you, Chase, and fantastic information. I look forward to continuing to learn about the great things that you're researching.
Okay, and we've been talking with Chase Hughes. You can read about him at his website, ellipsisbehavior.com. Behavior is spelled like an American, not a British person. ellipsisbehavior.com. I'm David Barron. I operate Eastern Oregon Hypnosis. I also operate New Hampshire Hypnosis. John?
I'm John Wylie. I own and operate Boise Hypnosis in beautiful Boise, Idaho.
And the author of?
And I'm the author of The Ultimate Guide to Hypnosis.
Excellent.
Which you can find on Amazon.
Wonderful. Excellent. Guys, thank you so much. And again, we're going to keep in touch, and you'll probably be back here a lot, Chase.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thanks a lot, David.
Okay,
good
great.
to meet you, John.
Take care.
And this has been the Hypnotorious Podcast with David Barron and John Wylie.